I was 10 years old when my parents sat me down in Grandpa's kitchen and told me I'd be staying at the ranch while they figured out their new lives after the divorce. The custody battle had been vicious, filled with lawyers and accusations, and somewhere in the chaos of dividing assets and responsibilities, they'd decided that my 8-year-old sister Emma would go with them while I would remain with Grandpa in Montana. "It's just temporary," Mom said, though she couldn't meet my eyes. "Until we get settled in our new places in Denver." Dad was more direct, the way he always was when delivering bad news. "You love it here, son. You're always happier on the ranch than in town. Grandpa needs help with the cattle, and you're old enough to be useful." I watched from the porch as they loaded Emma's belongings into the car, along with the few possessions they'd decided to take from their old life. Emma cried and reached for me as they drove away, but I was too shocked to cry. I just stood there, feeling like I'd been discarded, chosen last in some cruel game of family selection. Grandpa put his weathered hand on my shoulder as the car disappeared down the long gravel road. "Well, boy," he said in his quiet way, "looks like it's just you and me now." I felt abandoned, unwanted, like the child nobody had fought for in the custody proceedings. Emma got to go with our parents to start fresh in the city, with opportunities for good schools and cultural experiences, while I was stuck on a remote ranch with an old man who barely spoke except to give instructions about chores. The ranch house felt enormous and empty that first night. My room was in the back, overlooking the pastures where cattle grazed under the endless Montana sky. I lay awake wondering why my parents had chosen Emma over me, why I wasn't worth taking along to their new lives. I had no idea that this moment of apparent abandonment was actually the beginning of the greatest gift anyone could have given me. Chapter 2. Learning the Land. Grandpa didn't believe in idle time or self-pity. The morning after my parents left, he woke me at dawn and handed me a pair of work gloves that were too big for my 10-year-old hands. "Ranch doesn't run itself," he said simply. "Time you learned what real work looks like." Those first months were the hardest of my young life. I missed my parents and Emma desperately, and the physical demands of ranch work seemed overwhelming for a child who had spent most of his time indoors playing video games. My hands blistered from handling rope and tools, my legs ached from long days in the saddle, and I fell into bed exhausted every night. But Grandpa was patient in his gruff way. He taught me to ride properly, to read cattle behavior, and to understand the rhythms of ranch life that had sustained his family for 3 generations. He showed me how to mend fences, how to recognize signs of illness in livestock, and how to work with the land instead of against it. "Ranching isn't just about raising cattle," he explained as we rode through the vast pastures one evening. "It's about understanding the land, respecting the animals, and being part of something bigger than yourself." Slowly, I began to understand that the ranch was more than just dirt and grass and cattle. It was a complex ecosystem that required constant attention, careful planning, and deep knowledge that took years to develop. Grandpa had been working this land for over 50 years, and every decision he made was informed by decades of experience. I started to take pride in the small tasks he trusted me with. When I successfully helped deliver a calf or repaired a section of fence without supervision, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was different from anything I'd experienced in school or sports. The ranch was teaching me lessons about responsibility, perseverance, and the satisfaction that comes from meaningful work. But I was still too young and hurt to appreciate what Grandpa was really giving me. Chapter 3. The visits that stung. My parents visited sporadically during those first few years, usually arriving with expensive gifts and promises to take me for longer visits soon. But those visits always ended the same way, with them leaving again, taking Emma back to their comfortable city lives while I remained on the ranch. Emma would tell me about her new schools, her friends, and the activities she was involved in. She seemed to be thriving in the urban environment, with opportunities for music lessons, art classes, and cultural experiences that rural Montana couldn't provide. "You should come visit us more often," she'd say during one Christmas visit. "There's so much to do in the city. Don't you get lonely out here with just Grandpa and the cattle?" I did get lonely sometimes, But I was also beginning to develop a deep connection to the land that I couldn't explain to someone who had never experienced it. The vastness of the sky, the satisfaction of a successful roundup, and the quiet beauty of sunrise over the mountains were becoming part of who I was. But the visits from my family always left me feeling conflicted. I'd see the nice clothes Emma wore, the latest gadgets my parents brought her, and the easy affection they showed each other, and I'd wonder again why I hadn't been worth taking along. Grandpa seemed to understand my confusion without me having to explain it. After particularly difficult visits, he'd find extra work for us to do together, keeping me busy and focused on immediate tasks rather than dwelling on what I felt I was missing. People make choices based on what they think is best at the time, he said once after my parents had left following a tense weekend visit. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but you can't live your life waiting for other people to validate your worth. I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but his words stayed with me as I continued to grow up on the ranch, learning skills and values that would serve me for the rest of my life. Chapter 4. Finding my purpose. By the time I turned 14, I had stopped expecting my parents to take me back. The ranch had become my home in a way that went beyond just living there. I understood its rhythms, its needs, and my role in keeping it productive and healthy. Grandpa began trusting me with more complex responsibilities. I learned to manage the breeding program, to make decisions about pasture rotation, and to handle the financial aspects of ranching like budgeting for feed and veterinary expenses. "You've got a natural feel for this work," he told me one day, as we watched a herd of cattle that I'd helped select and manage reaching market weight. "Some people can learn the mechanics of ranching, but you understand the soul of it." I was starting to realize that what I'd initially seen as exile was actually an apprenticeship in a way of life that few people my age ever got to experience. While my city-raised peers were learning to navigate shopping malls and social media, I was learning to read the land, to work with animals, and to take responsibility for outcomes that mattered. The ranch was also teaching me about business in ways that no classroom could. I learned about commodity markets, risk management, and long-term planning. Every decision had real consequences, and success required both hard work and smart thinking. More importantly, I was developing a sense of identity that wasn't dependent on other people's approval or validation. The land didn't care about my family situation or my feelings. It responded to good stewardship and punished neglect with equal indifference. I began to take pride in my growing expertise and the respect I was earning from other ranchers in the community. When neighboring ranchers started asking for my opinion on cattle breeding or pasture management, I realized I was becoming someone whose knowledge and judgment were valued. The abandoned child was transforming into a confident young man with skills, purpose, and a deep connection to something larger than himself. Chapter 5. High School Challenges. When I started high school in the small town 20 miles from the ranch, the contrast between my life and that of my classmates became more pronounced. While they worried about social status and weekend parties, I was concerned with cattle prices and weather patterns that could affect our grazing schedule. Dating was particularly challenging. Most girls my age couldn't understand why I chose to spend my free time working on the ranch instead of hanging out at the mall or playing video games. My hands were always rough from ranch work, and I smelled like hay and cattle more often than cologne. "Don't you want to do something more exciting with your life?" one girl asked me after I'd explained why I couldn't go to a Friday night football game because we were moving cattle to winter pasture. The question stung because part of me did wonder if I was missing out on the typical teenage experience. I saw my classmates getting college acceptance letters and making plans for careers in business, technology, and other fields that seemed more glamorous than ranching. But every time I considered leaving the ranch for college or a different career path, I'd ride through the pastures with Grandpa and remember why I loved this life. The work was hard, but it was meaningful in a way that few other careers could match. Grandpa seemed to sense my internal struggle. "There's nothing wrong with questioning your path," he told me one evening as we repaired a water tank that had been damaged by winter storms. "But make sure you're questioning it for the right reasons. Don't let other people's definitions of success make you doubt the value of what you're building here." He was right, but the pressure to conform to conventional expectations was constant. My parents, during their infrequent visits, would ask about my college plans and suggest that I consider more practical career options. "Ranching is a hard life," Dad said during one visit. "We want you to have more opportunities than that." I was beginning to understand that they saw the ranch as a limitation rather than an opportunity. Chapter 6. The college decision senior year brought intense pressure to apply for college and choose a career path that would take me away from the ranch. My guidance counselor, teachers, and even some family members assumed that anyone with my grades and leadership experience would naturally want to pursue higher education in a traditional field. "You could study business or agricultural science," my mother suggested during one of her visits. "With your intelligence and work ethic, you could be successful in any field you choose." But I had already chosen my field, and it was the one I'd been learning for 8 years. The ranch wasn't just my home. It was my calling, my passion, and increasingly, my area of expertise. Grandpa and I had long conversations about my future during that final year of high school. He never pressured me to stay, but he did help me understand the full scope of what I'd be inheriting if I chose to continue ranching. "This operation is worth more than most people realize," he explained one evening as we reviewed the ranch's financial records. "We own 5,000 acres outright with no debt. The cattle operation is profitable, and we have mineral rights that generate additional income." He showed me profit and loss statements that revealed the ranch was generating substantial income, far more than I'd realized. The operation wasn't just successful, it was thriving in ways that would provide financial security for generations. "But money isn't the only consideration," he continued. "This land has been in our family for 3 generations. It represents a way of life, a connection to the earth, and a responsibility to be good stewards of natural resources." I realized that choosing to stay on the ranch wasn't settling for less. It was choosing to build on a foundation that most people my age could only dream of having. I decided to attend the local community college part-time to study ranch management and agricultural business while continuing to work full-time on the ranch. It was a compromise that allowed me to gain additional knowledge while staying true to my chosen path. Chapter 7. Emma's Different World. While I was deepening my commitment to ranch life, Emma was following a completely different trajectory. She excelled in school, participated in numerous extracurricular activities, and eventually earned a scholarship to a prestigious university where she studied marketing and communications. During her college years, she would occasionally visit the ranch, but the gap between our experiences had grown enormous. She was sophisticated, well-traveled, and comfortable in social situations that would have intimidated me. She spoke knowledgeably about art, literature, and current events, while I could discuss cattle genetics, grass management, and commodity markets. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished here," she told me during one visit. "But don't you ever wonder what else is out there? Don't you want to see the world beyond these pastures?" Her question made me defensive, but it also made me think. Had I limited myself by staying on the ranch? Was I missing out on experiences and opportunities that could have enriched my life? But as I looked around at the operation Grandpa and I had built together, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose that I couldn't imagine finding anywhere else. The ranch wasn't a limitation. It was a platform for creativity, innovation, and meaningful work. I had modernized our breeding program, implemented rotational grazing systems, and diversified our income streams through direct-to-consumer beef sales. The operation was more profitable and environmentally sustainable than it had ever been, and I was just getting started. Emma's success in the corporate world was impressive, but it didn't diminish the value of what I was accomplishing in agriculture. We had simply chosen different paths that suited our different personalities and interests. When she graduated and took a high-paying job with a marketing firm in Chicago, I was genuinely happy for her. But I was also confident that I had made the right choice for myself. The ranch had taught me that success isn't measured only by salary or social status. It's also measured by the impact you have on the world and the satisfaction you derive from your work. Chapter 8. Grandpa's Declining Health. When I turned 25, Grandpa began showing signs of the age and wear that decades of physical labor had imposed on his body. His arthritis made it difficult for him to handle some of the heavier work, and he started relying on me more heavily for the day-to-day management of the operation. Rather than seeing this as a burden, I welcomed the increased responsibility. I had been preparing for this transition my entire adult life, and I was confident in my ability to maintain and improve the ranch's productivity and profitability. But Grandpa's declining health also brought conversations about the future that we had been avoiding. He began talking more openly about his plans for the ranch after his death, and his intentions surprised me. "I've been thinking about updating my will," he said one evening as we sat on the porch after a long day of moving cattle to summer pasture. "Want to make sure everything is clear about what happens to this place." I had assumed that the ranch would eventually be divided among his children and grandchildren, with me receiving a portion based on my years of work and commitment. But Grandpa had different ideas. "Your parents made their choice when they left you here," he said bluntly. "They chose city life and corporate careers. Emma chose the same path, but you chose this land, and this land chose you." He explained that he had been watching me for 15 years, evaluating not just my ranching skills but my character, my commitment, and my vision for the future. He had concluded that I was the only family member who truly understood the value of what he had built and the responsibility that came with owning it. "I'm leaving everything to you," he said simply. "The land, the cattle, the equipment, and the bank accounts. All of it." I was stunned by the magnitude of his decision and the trust it represented. But I was also concerned about how the rest of the family would react to being excluded from the inheritance. Chapter 9. The Family's Reaction. When Grandpa's health took a serious turn and he was hospitalized with pneumonia, the family gathered for what we all feared might be his final days. It was during this crisis that he decided to reveal his inheritance plans to everyone. The reaction was explosive. My parents and Emma were shocked and angry that they were being excluded from what they now realized was a substantial estate. The ranch that they had seen as a burden or limitation was suddenly revealed to be worth millions of dollars. "This isn't fair," my mother said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We're his children too. We deserve a share of what he's built." Dad was more direct in his anger. "You manipulated him," he accused me. "You stayed here and worked on him for years, turning him against his own children." Emma was hurt but less accusatory. "I understand that you've worked hard here," she said, "but cutting the rest of us out completely seems extreme." Grandpa, despite his weakened condition, was firm in his decision. "I'm not punishing anyone," he explained from his hospital bed. "I'm rewarding the person who chose to build their life around this land and this way of life. Tommy didn't stay here because he had to. He stayed because he wanted to." He went on to explain that he had offered each of his children the opportunity to take over the ranch when they were younger, but they had all chosen different paths. He had respected their choices, but he wasn't going to let their decisions now compromise the future of the operation. "This ranch needs someone who understands it, loves it, and will protect it for future generations," he said. "Tommy is that person." The family meeting ended with harsh words and hurt feelings. My parents and Emma left the hospital angry and resentful, feeling that they had been cheated out of their rightful inheritance. I was caught between loyalty to Grandpa and sympathy for my family's disappointment. But I also understood that his decision was based on 15 years of observation and careful consideration. Chapter 10. Understanding the Gift. Grandpa recovered from his pneumonia, but the family crisis had taken its toll on everyone. My parents and Emma maintained minimal contact, and when they did visit, the atmosphere was tense and uncomfortable. During Grandpa's recovery period, he spent more time explaining his decision and helping me understand the full scope of what I would be inheriting. The ranch was just the beginning. He had also built a substantial investment portfolio, owned mineral rights that generated royalty income, and had business interests that extended beyond cattle ranching. "I didn't just want to leave you land," he explained. "I wanted to leave you the foundation for building something even bigger. This ranch can support your family for generations, but it can also be the base for expanding into other areas." He showed me his plans for developing eco-tourism opportunities, his investments in agricultural technology companies, and his partnerships with conservation organizations that had created additional revenue streams while protecting the land's environmental value. "The key is diversification," he said. Ranching will always be the core of what we do, but smart ranchers find ways to leverage their land and knowledge into multiple income sources. I began to understand that what I was inheriting wasn't just a ranch. It was a business empire that had been carefully built over decades. Grandpa had used the ranch's success to create wealth and opportunities that extended far beyond cattle production. But he had also been careful to ensure that the core values of ranching, hard work, stewardship, and connection to the land, remained central to everything he built. Money is just a tool, he reminded me. The real wealth is in understanding how to create value, how to work with the land, and how to build something that will last beyond your own lifetime. I was beginning to appreciate the magnitude of the gift he was giving me, but also the responsibility that came with it. Chapter 11. Taking Control. When Grandpa passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, I inherited everything he had promised. The will reading was a formality. The family already knew what to expect, and while they weren't happy about it, they had accepted the reality of his decision. The transition to full ownership was both exciting and overwhelming. I was suddenly responsible for managing assets worth over $12 million, including 5,000 acres of prime ranch land, a cattle operation with over 2,000 head, and various business investments that required careful attention. But I was also inheriting the relationships and reputation that Grandpa had built over decades. Other ranchers, suppliers, and business partners all knew and respected him, and they were watching to see if I could maintain the standards he had established. The first year was challenging as I learned to balance the day-to-day operations of ranching with the broader responsibilities of managing a diversified business portfolio. I made some mistakes, but I also had successes that proved I was capable of building on what Grandpa had created. I modernized some of the ranching operations, implementing precision agriculture techniques that increased efficiency while reducing environmental impact. I also expanded the ecotourism business and made strategic investments in sustainable agriculture companies that showed promising growth potential. Most importantly, I maintained the values and principles that Grandpa had taught me. I continued to be a good steward of the land, a fair employer, and a contributing member of the rural community. The ranch that had once felt like exile had become the foundation for a life of purpose, prosperity, and deep satisfaction. I was building something that would benefit not just me, but future generations of my family and the broader community. Chapter 12. Reconciliation and Growth. 5 years after Grandpa's death, Emma reached out to me with a request that surprised me. She had been laid off from her marketing job during an economic downturn and was struggling to find comparable employment in the competitive urban job market. "I know things have been difficult between us," she said during a phone call, "but I was wondering if there might be opportunities for me to get involved with the ranch business." I was initially skeptical. Emma had spent her entire adult life in the corporate world and had no experience with ranching or rural business. But she was family, and I remembered how close we had been as children before our parents' divorce separated us. I invited her to visit and spend some time learning about the operation. What I discovered was that her marketing and communication skills could be valuable assets for expanding the ranch's direct-to-consumer sales and developing the ecotourism opportunities. Emma was amazed by what I had accomplished. "I had no idea the ranch was this sophisticated," she admitted, as I showed her the precision agriculture equipment and the computerized systems we use to monitor cattle health and pasture conditions. She was also impressed by the financial success of the operation and the respect I had earned in the agricultural community. "I always thought you were limiting yourself by staying here," she said. "But now I see that you are actually building something incredible." We developed a plan for Emma to move back to the area and take charge of marketing and business development for the ranch's diversified operations. Her corporate experience and my agricultural expertise proved to be a powerful combination. Working together also helped us rebuild the relationship that had been damaged by years of separation and misunderstanding. We were finally able to talk honestly about our childhood experiences and how differently we had interpreted our parents' decision to leave me at the ranch. "I always felt guilty that they took me and left you," Emma confessed. "But now I understand that you got the better deal." Chapter 13. The Legacy Realized. 10 years after inheriting Grandpa's ranch, I stood on the same hill where I had once felt abandoned and unwanted, looking out over an operation that had grown beyond anything I could have imagined as a child. The ranch now encompassed 7,500 acres, employed 25 people, and generated annual revenues in the millions. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real success was in what we had built together, a sustainable ranching operation that served as a model for other producers, a business that provided good jobs for rural families, and a legacy that honored the values Grandpa had taught me. Emma had become an integral part of the operation, using her skills to develop new markets and expand our reach. Our parents, now in their 70s, had also come to appreciate what I had accomplished and had apologized for their earlier resentment about the inheritance. "We were wrong to be angry," Dad admitted during a recent visit. "Grandpa knew what he was doing when he left everything to you. You've proven that you were the right person to carry on what he built." I had also started a family of my own, marrying a woman who shared my love of ranch life and commitment to sustainable agriculture. Our children were growing up on the same land where I had learned the values of hard work, responsibility, and stewardship. The ranch that had once felt like exile had become the foundation for everything I valued most: meaningful work, financial security, strong family relationships, and deep connection to the land and community. Looking back, I could see that what I had interpreted as abandonment had actually been the greatest gift my parents could have given me. By leaving me with Grandpa, they had given me the opportunity to learn from a master, to develop skills and values that would serve me throughout my life, and to inherit a legacy that most people could only dream of. The 10-year-old boy who had felt unwanted and discarded had grown into a man who understood his worth and his purpose. The ranch had taught me that true wealth isn't just about money. It's about building something meaningful that will benefit others and last beyond your own lifetime. Every morning when I rode through the pastures that were now mine, I thought about Grandpa and the wisdom he had shown in recognizing my potential when I couldn't see it myself. He had known that the abandoned child would become the heir who could carry his legacy forward. The land that had seemed like a prison had become my kingdom, and the grandfather who had seemed like a stern taskmaster had been my greatest teacher and benefactor. Thank you for listening to this powerful story of apparent abandonment that became the greatest gift, and of how sometimes what feels like rejection is actually preparation for something extraordinary. This tale reminds us that our circumstances don't define our destiny, and that the most valuable inheritances are often the ones that require us to grow into them. The story of the Montana ranch shows us that true wealth comes not just from what we receive, but from what we do with the opportunities we're given and how we choose to build on the foundations that others have laid for us. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please let me know what part of the world you're listening from, and share any experiences you've had with feeling overlooked or abandoned that later turned out to be blessings in disguise. If this story inspired you to think differently about the challenges and opportunities in your own life, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with others. These stories matter because they remind us that sometimes what appears to be the worst thing that could happen to us is actually the best thing, and that patient dedication to worthy work always pays dividends in the end. Until next time, remember that the most valuable legacies are built by those who choose to bloom where they're planted, and that sometimes being left behind is actually being positioned for the greatest success.